Hi, Lou Pulsifer here to talk about the World Boardgaming Championships, usually just called WBC since the name is a little bit highfalutin. It is a national tournament convention, and it's been held annually for more than 30 years. Originally it was called AvalonCon, run by Avalon Hill, but when Avalon Hill went away, Don Greenwood continued to run the convention. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is a tourist area in southern Pennsylvania, but beginning in 2016 it'll be near Somerset, Pennsylvania at Seven Springs Resort. That's at the Lancaster Host Hotel, so the entire convention is in one large hotel, about 1,700 people. So the entire convention wouldn't fill up the vendor exhibit area at Gen Con, which has 56,000 attendees this year. There is an auction store, there's open gaming, the vendors are there from Friday to Sunday, but mostly it's tournaments. It is also strictly board and card games. There are no RPGs, no collectible card games, no minis, no video games, though there is some Werewolf late at night. So with this tournament orientation, you pay a single fee, which is about the same as the Gen Con fee, and you play in as many tournaments as you can for the week, or however many days you decide to go. There are war game tournaments, there are Euro game tournaments. Ticket to Ride was the largest in 2014 with 115 people. There are kids game tournaments like Liar's Dice and Werewolf. But you'd have to say that WBC is one of the last strongholds of old-time wargaming. You see lots of paper boards, lots of half-inch counters, numbers on the counters, good old-style war games, or bad old-style war games, depending on how you look at it. To give you an idea of how things go, 35 people was a good turnout for the Britannia tournament, which has been out of print for more than 2 years, at the WBC. And I'm going to mix some photos in here as I go along. There's giant Circus Maximus being played. Each of these orange boards is a Circus Maximus board. Jim Jordan, who is the game master for Britannia, adds his own plaques to the ones that are given by the convention. Highest score with red, highest score with blue, and so on. So there's a lot of friendly competition. The tournaments typically have several heats. You don't have to play in every heat, but of course, the more heats you play, the more likely you are to get to the semifinal or the final. Most of the players are pretty helpful, but they're also really skillful. The kind of people that some gamers call sharks. I have a friend who won't go to this convention, even though he's not very far away in Washington, D.C., because the sharks are too much for him. But some games are more affected by the sharks than others are. It depends. Now, many people who come to play at the convention come because they can't play the games at home because they're big games or they're old games that are out of print. They can't find opponents. They don't have enough space. They don't have enough time to play a 4-hour game or an 8-hour game, whatever. Of course, a lot of the games are not highly competitive to begin with. Euro games tend not to be very competitive at all. So you can find lots of things to do where you don't have to worry about somebody being a shark. Here's a small part of one heat of the Ticket to Ride tournament. Here's maybe half of the vendor area is in view. Here's about half of the demo area where people were showing new games that were not yet in print or were just about to be printed, or they want to get into print. And you can play those games there. Now, why do I go? Well, I go to talk with game publishers, some of whom do not go to Gen Con. I go to be with the Britannia guys and watch the Britannia tournament. I don't play, of course. And I get a little prototype testing done by really skillful players. But I usually only go Thursday to Sunday. I don't go the whole week because that seems to me to be a bit much. Keep in mind, Sunday is mostly dead, except for the vendors, which of course is fine with me. And the vendors pack up about noon. It's one of those nice friendly conventions where you see lots of people you know, you see lots of people who are very well known in games, and you see lots of the same folks every year. Those of you who are familiar with PrezCon is pretty much modeled on WBC. WBC is, say, 2.5 times as large, but essentially they're the same kind of convention. Here's one of those grognards with his half-inch counters, each mounted on a magnet, and his board is on a piece of metal so that the counters won't get knocked around and so on, and you can see it's a big game with lots of counters. And this is like kind of a last stronghold. There's a whole room full of this stuff. And here is a monster game. It's not the best photo, but on the far side you can see this vast line of pieces. And that is a really large board. You can eat in the convention center, the hotel, and I think the food is okay. But because it's a tourist place within a couple of miles, there are lots and lots and lots of restaurants of all kinds. As I said, sometimes I get my prototypes played, and here's one being played. Something that's vaguely Stratego-like. So, Don Greenwood, who is Mr. Avalon Hill as far as I'm concerned, runs this convention. He intends it to be family friendly, and he succeeds.